欢迎收看今天文茜的世界周报。今天文茜的世界周报是世界周报第17年的第一集。在16年前，也就是2005年9月3号，我们播出的第一集的专题是美国的卡翠娜风暴。历史循环了16年，在我们第17年的第一集，我们要报道的是美国的AIDA 飓风。这个飓风从形成到最后成为飓风，只有60个小时。它的意思是什么？过去一个飓风的警告，它提升为叫民众要疏离，通常时间72小时，也就是政府它下达紧急命令，民众赶快疏散，总共的时间至少要72个小时。可是它从形成到正式登陆的时间，不过就是60个小时到70个小时。换句话说，连人们要紧急疏散的时间差一点都来不及。但是由于16年前的狠狠的教训，这个地方的防洪措施做得比过去好，老百姓也知道赶紧的疏离。但令所有的人更震惊的是，这个飓风攻向了美国的东北部。过去飓风顶多是在美国的南方 Louisiana 或者是 New Orleans， 这一次直接攻向了纽约，美国的心脏 New Jersey、New England， 一直往北。往北的时候，我们所了解的飓风就是一般台湾所称的台风，它的风力是减弱，但是它却带来了极端的雨量，创下了美国有气象记录以来最大的时雨量。纽约市这个最繁华的20世纪到21世纪的城市，不再以耀眼的帝国大厦的风貌呈现在世人的面前。
This morning, New Orleans fighting Ida's fury and the mass power outages that came with it. The then Cat 4 hurricane barreling into southern Louisiana with catastrophic force. The deadly storm packing winds more than 150 miles per hour, triggering a life-threatening storm surge. Exactly 16 years after Hurricane Katrina made landfall.
Many people are going to be tested in ways that we can only imagine.
In Grand Isle on the Gulf Coast, terrifying images of Ida's wrath. Rising waters and whipping winds, leaving buildings partially submerged in water, flooding outside the fire department, making it impossible for first responders to reach those in need.
Those folks are just going to have to hunker down and wait for the storm to pass.
如同诅咒般的意外巧合，飓风艾达在16年前卡翠娜登陆重创纽奥良的同一天，8月29号周日下午，从墨西哥湾长驱直入，替路易斯安那州带来致命性灾难。
So the eye wall of Hurricane Ida is now approaching New Orleans, and we are feeling those hurricane gusts somewhere around 85 miles per hour. And the sad part is things are only going to get worse.
And they did, winds reaching more than 170 miles an hour on the coast. Power lines like these stood no chance. The rain, relentless, testing the state's upgraded levees, which thankfully appeared to have held.
Oh my God! Go, go!
And there you see it, the sheer power of Hurricane Ida. It made landfall as a Cat 4 hurricane. And while the winds have weakened, Ida is already one of the most powerful storms the state of Louisiana has seen.
This is a very dangerous and a very real situation.
Praying I can go back to a normal home, but I'm not sure at this point.
We're praying for the best and planning prepared for the worst. As soon as the storm passes, we're going to put the country's full might behind the rescue and recovery.
Right now, my concern is we've lost contact with Grand Isle.
大西洋月刊回溯，这个热带低压从加勒比海形成到命名为艾达后登陆路易斯安那富尔琼港，只花了短短74小时。 整个风暴在升级为飓风后，首次抵达路易斯安那土地的时间更短，可能不到60小时。尽管总统拜登在第一时间发布紧急命令，并下令动员资源防灾救灾，但一场预知的风暴却只有60小时的警告期。相较于过去，就连一个最简单的疏散令都需要在至少72小时前发布，以解决人们移动和寻求庇护所遭遇的困难。艾达的出现证明了我们正达到飓风准备的极限。当代城市根本没有足够的时间躲避类似的飓风灾难。
Entire communities almost wiped off the map. More than 1 million customers now without power. The outages could last for weeks, and officials fear the death toll will rise.
There's somebody in there, I think.
The massive search and rescue operation ramping up since the storm hit. This woman pulled out of her flooded car. Traveled to hard-hit La Place, just west of New Orleans. Rescuers in boats and helicopters desperately trying to reach those trapped in flooded homes. Where the town had been, now a lake, accessible only by boat and by aircraft. Scenes defying the imagination. The hurricane toppling semi-trucks, submerging cars. Helicopters swooping down, landing on Interstate 10 to scoop up the most vulnerable, including that woman in the wheelchair.
纽时报道称，在过去有记录的70年里，美国平均每年发生3次登陆风暴。飓风艾达号称170年来登陆当地最强，不止在侵袭路易斯安那州飓风史上排名第5。纵观过去2年，全美排名也高居第17。这回相隔16年再次袭击纽奥良，被视为对该区防洪系统的又一次测试。尤其是路易斯安那州在白宫4月所发布的国家基础建设报告书上，才刚拿了一个低加。艾达的考验，无非是要证明路易斯安那州已彻底走出脆弱的阴霾。根据当地公共事业单位的评估报告，截至周日晚间，路易斯安那州有近80万户断电，纽奥良及附近城市共有近100万人收到山洪爆发警告。人们不只要担心堤坝处于危险中，还要慎防附近炼油厂等重要石化设施可能因风灾而产生的污染外溢。灾民被要求暂时不要回到受创家园，因为不止道路电线严重受创，密西西比河还因洪水改变了方向。尽管艾达目前已减弱成为热带低压，持续往北远离，但灾区死亡人数仍持续攀升，越来越多遭袭击处已形同死城。
The ceiling and every room caved in, and it was unbelievable.
Overnight in neighboring Mississippi, a highway collapse involving multiple vehicles, killing at least 2 and injuring 10 others. Officials pointing to torrential rain and the impacts of Ida as a contributing factor. Back in Louisiana, many residents now struggling just for the basics. This line for gas stretching down the street as a mangled transformer dangles above the cars. In New Orleans, an eerie quiet as hundreds of thousands remain without power. Residents in the hardest hit areas could have outages for weeks. And officials warning conditions are still very dangerous, including possible alligator-infested floodwaters. In Slidell, a 71-year-old man is missing after being attacked by an alligator and losing his arm.
美国家海洋及大气总署气候科学家 James Cosing 日前接受纽时专访时表示，全球暖化正彻底改变热带风暴。不止异常温暖的大西洋表面温度替风暴提供更多能量，大气内可容纳的水蒸气量增加，也使每场风暴释放出更多的降雨。更重要的是，全球大气环流或季风放缓，也导致风暴移动变慢。再加上美国当地因风暴所导致的降雨量，自1947年以来已暴增25%，一旦停留时间变长， 每场风暴在彻底消失前，都将形同一场漫长无止境的折磨。
Look at that tornado!
Storm chasers captured these images of a twister touching down in New Jersey. Ida continues its relentless march north as tornado watches and flash flood warnings were issued across large parts of the Northeast Wednesday night. New Jersey Governor Phil Murphy declared a state of emergency.
Here in New Jersey, for instance, they had the tornado warnings at the same time they had flooding, so people were going in their basements and in some cases having to deal with water in the basements as they're trying to get away from a tornado.
Here in New York City, the National Weather Service says it issued its first ever flash flood emergency for parts of the city.
The report was 3 to 6 inches over the course of the whole day, which was not a particularly problematic amount. That turned into the biggest single hour of rainfall in New York City history with almost no warning.
Floodwaters surged into this New York City apartment and turned this wide boulevard into a lake. The retractable roof at the U.S. Open Tennis Stadium wasn't enough to hold back Ida's rain and wind, forcing this match to be called off. And parts of the subway system taking on a waterfall of rain from the sidewalks above.
仿佛预言了纽约这场500年不遇的强降雨。气候科学家 James Cosin 文中提及，就算风暴本身没有任何改变，风暴潮也会因海平面上升导致沿岸洪灾。换言之，桑迪飓风的风暴潮若发生在100年前，可能不会淹没曼哈顿下城区，但如今一场极端暴雨却可能把纽约淹没。
Because people were just so shocked watching this happen. The water was just gushing out of the wall, flooding the platform and tracks. This is a very dramatic case, but platforms all across the city were flooded, and it's what's forced all of these lines out of service. No word yet on when they will get going again. We also saw those incredible images of flooding at Newark Liberty International Airport in New Jersey. This video right here, the baggage room overnight. And I'm told it got even worse. Workers tell us parts of the airport actually had to be evacuated. The first floor of the terminal also ended up flooded. At least 370 flights have already been canceled at Newark today.
At least 14 people dead. 8 confirmed fatalities were in Brooklyn and Queens, including a 2-year-old boy. 5 more confirmed dead in New Jersey.
They survived. I've lost everything of mine. And after seeing their condition, their situation, my brain is not working at all.
They got stuck in the back and they couldn't come out. They were trying. It's very, very sad.
谁能料想得到，璀璨的爵士之都会再次因一场飓风成为被遗弃的荒岛？由于半数房屋建筑几近全毁，当地官员预估至少要5年才能重现昔日风华。而威力减弱的艾达转往美国东北后，仍辖豪雨酿灾，这也让美国内部绷紧神经，对于今夏任何飓风来袭都不敢大意。
由于美国是世界的中心，而纽约又是美国的中心，总是要等到气候重创了美国，尤其是重创了像纽约这样的城市的时候，世人好像才觉得这是一桩很严重的大事。事实上，答案并不在纽约，答案在北极。在北极呢，7月份记录了1个礼拜3次的雷暴天气。什么叫做北极的雷暴？对科学家来讲，这是不可能想象的事情。雷暴的出现，它基本的整个气候环境就是它在空气中、大气层里头要有足够的热对流，也就是空气里头在北冰洋的上方要有热的对流。这个地方应该都是冰冷的、冰层的，虽然它在融化，它应该是很冷的，怎么会有热对流呢？因为这个地方的全球暖化的速度是世界的3倍，在今年7月的1个礼拜里头出现了3次北极的雷暴，它已经告诉我们，这个世界完全都改变了。
一道闪电划过天际，在其他地方或许显得稀松平常，然而当这样的现象出现在北极地区，事情就非同小可了。从7月10号开始，1周内3次雷暴，横扫从俄罗斯西伯利亚到美国阿拉斯加北部的北极地区。
雷暴在北极地区非常的罕见，如今连续出现，引发了气象学家的震惊。通常来说，北冰洋上方的空气缺乏产生雷暴所需要的热对流，特别是在洋面冰封的情况下。
今年3月发表在美国《地球物理通讯月刊》上的一项研究表明，自2010年以来，北极圈内夏季打雷闪电的现象是原先的3倍。这个趋势与气候变化及北极地区的海冰流失增加直接相关。随着海冰消失，水分蒸发变多，给日益变暖的大气增添了湿度，并且伴随着温度升高。
The source of climate change is in the mid-latitudes where most of the fossil fuels are being burned, but most of the biggest impacts are near the poles.
I would say this is ground zero for climate change, like the polar regions.
Atmospheric scientist Andy Prine says there's already been a 4-degree increase in temperature there, double what we've seen in the lower 48, and parts of North Alaska are now seeing thunderstorms for the first time. He says it's not just due to added heat, but also added moisture from the melting of summertime sea ice.
So Alaska is becoming way more humid in the future because of that. And this fuels these thunderstorms.
Prine says even in southern Alaska, thunderstorms are rare. He just published research that shows the temperature rising another 7 to 12 degrees by the end of the century in Alaska, which could triple the amount of thunderstorm activity.
Like it's a risky situation because we don't know really what to expect because we haven't seen it yet.
专家说，更多的暴风雪意味着更多的山洪与山体滑坡，而闪电越多，野火也会更频繁。例如，近年来西伯利亚越来越猛烈的森林大火，以及阿拉斯加6月的大火，都是最直接的证据。费尔班克斯国际北极研究中心的研究人员说，到本世纪末，将有更多阿拉斯加冻原会经常发生火灾，面积会是过去的2倍，火灾发生的频率则是过去的4倍。
And this might really become more frequent in the future. This is all connected to the extreme strong warming in Alaska.
根据美国全国大气研究中心的科学家，过去1年在《气候动力学》杂志上发表的2项研究指出，若当前的气候趋势继续下去，到本世纪末，仅阿拉斯加一地的雷暴活动就有可能增加到过去的3倍。
The annual Arctic Report Card says the pace of sea ice decline and surface ocean warming is unprecedented.
U.S. government scientists say there is an unparalleled period of warmth in the Arctic.
美国国家海洋及大气总署发布的2020北极年度报告指出，北极圈暖化的速度比地球上任何一处快3倍以上，这也让阿拉斯加诞生了一批气候难民。位于冰天雪地的亚北极圈的纽托克，当地常年冰封的永冻层已因暖化开始溶解。
By the end of this century, as many as 13 million Americans will be forced to move because of rising sea levels, flooding, and erosion. But even though this wave of climate migration is coming right toward us, the federal government has no plans for how to deal with it. And some parts of the U.S. are already losing ground to the sea. In Alaska, 31 villages, home to about 18,000 people, are in danger of disintegrating. And for one village, there's no time left.
In the morning after the storm, Della assessed the damage.
Every time a piece of land breaks off when I'm staying over at my uncle's, I can hear it and I can feel it.
You can feel it. What do you mean by you can feel it?
The house shakes a little.
The house shakes.
At one point, a big chunk of land broke off, and it was felt and heard all across the village.
Because of climate change, the permafrost under Newtok has been melting and then eroding for years. Since the village was founded in the 1950s, it's lost nearly a mile of coastline. According to the Army Corps of Engineers, houses could begin to fall into the water within the year. There's 40 feet of land standing between the first house and the shoreline. During a storm in early October, Newtok lost 10 feet in just 4 days.
Do you feel threatened by this?
Oh, yeah. Especially because I live so close. I think we have less than a year if the winds keep coming, if the rain keeps coming.
What happens if your uncle's house isn't livable anymore?
We would have to go somewhere else.
And where would you go?
Wherever we can.
when I was growing up, the Bering Sea would be completely locked up. And now what ice we get is, we call it sikuliak. That's the young ice that's formed from the bottom of the ocean as slush. It floats up. Now it's thin. It's easy to break up.
We need the ice, and with it diminishing, our walruses are in danger. Even the whales that I depend on are in danger.
We have frequent storm surges, flooding, hotter temperatures, not only in the air but in the water. And it's affecting the well-being of fish, plants, and animals.
With the water being 10 to 15 degrees warmer in the Norton Sound, I caught so many belly-up fish in 2019 I've never caught before. My nets actually were totally stinky.
永冻层正在消失，北极圈的灵魂也正在消失，北极独特的生态圈正面临灭绝。人类得扪心自问，真要让这一切回不去吗？
在我们所说的气候极端里头，最严重的一个是洪水，另外一个是旱灾。全世界现在还有一个地区是波斯湾地区，非常多的城市都已经处于干旱的状态。从叙利亚、伊朗到波斯湾，这个地方将来很可能会因为干旱而发生让你惊讶的改变。另外，我们刚才特别提到，今天是文茜的世界周报的第17年的第一集。在16年前，我们开播的第一集，我们报道的是卡翠娜风暴，它发生在2005年的8月29日。
Hurricane Ida roared ashore on Sunday.
这一天是8月29号，多么可怕的巧合
！Incredibly, Hurricane Ida made landfall on the exact day, the anniversary of Hurricane Katrina, and it struck the same part of Louisiana. Katrina also produced record storm surge, upward to 28 feet along the Mississippi coast. So far, we are not seeing that kind of surge with Ida.
新闻里一再提起的卡翠娜飓风，是刻在纽奥良人心里最深的一道伤疤。
Early Sunday morning, Katrina had built into a dangerous Category 5 hurricane barreling towards New Orleans.
On August 29, Hurricane Katrina slammed into the Gulf Coast. The world watched as the levees surrounding New Orleans failed, flooding the city, leaving tens of thousands stranded and more than 1,000 dead.
准确的说是1833人，包括当下被大水淹死，还有因为救援太迟而枉死的人数。
How are you doing, sir?
I'm not doing good.
What happened?
The house just split in half.
Your house split in half?
Right here on Hollingham, Bayview. Back, we got up in the roof, all the way to the roof, and water came and the house just opened up, divided.
Who was at your house with you?
My wife.
Where is she now?
Can't find her body. She gone.
You can't find your wife?
Oh, she told me. She told me. I tried. I hold her hand tight as I could, and she told me, "You can't hold me." She said, "Take care of the kids and the grandkids and my kids."
What's your wife's name in case we can put this out there?
Tony Jackson.
Okay, and what's your name?
Hardy Jackson.
Where are you guys going?
We ain't got nowhere to go, nowhere I'm going. I'm lost. That's all I had. That's all I had.
Like so many others, Hardy Jackson didn't realize how fast the floodwaters would rise, how dangerous it was to stay at home in Biloxi, Mississippi. Hardy's wife, Tanette, was a good swimmer and didn't want to leave, so Hardy decided to stay with her. Deep down, Tanette must have sensed the danger because she sent their 3 children and grandchildren away from the house to higher ground.
This is a picture, the only picture with my mom,
and my dad together that was able to be saved.
Tony, Hardy and Tanette's daughter, was only 15 when Katrina hit.
I was trying to beg to stay, but my dad told me, you know, your mom knows best, so just go on and go to your friend's house.
那是他此生最后一次见到他的妈妈，他的妈妈最后连尸首也没找到。
I'm sorry. Only if I could have a back just for one day.
卡翠娜风灾最惨重的灾区在纽奥良。
Bodies in the streets, human beings decomposing for days. About a week after the storm hit, I was in a small boat on a flooded street in New Orleans. We came across the body of a man laying on top of a car.
It's a sickening sight, and it is just incredible to think that you're in the United States. I've never seen anything like this in the United States. This is something we've seen in Rwanda and the genocide in Sri Lanka after the tsunami, but a week after a storm to still have bodies exposed, just laying out dead is, it's mind-boggling.
These are some of the very first aerial pictures of what New Orleans looks like today.
The flooding left 80% of New Orleans underwater.
Even though we had predicted it, even though on paper we knew what was going to happen, the first time I actually saw it from the air, I just couldn't believe it. You know, it was a sight beyond my own imagination.
没有人能想到，因为卡翠娜在登陆当时级别比这次的艾达还低。
As a Category 4 hurricane, when it struck land near Port Fourchon with winds gusting at 150 miles per hour, Katrina was a Category 3 storm when it made landfall with winds of about 127 miles per hour.
为何会如此知名呢？主要是纽奥良位于密西西比河出海的城市，绝大多数市区低于海平面。当然，纽奥良也不是毫无防备，整道海岸建了巨大的堤防保护，真爱人的力量难以胜天。
It was classified as a Category 3 storm. Katrina was only 1 day away from the Louisiana coast when the mayor of New Orleans issued an evacuation order. Unfortunately, it was too late. The sea level had already risen in a phenomenon called storm surge. Water rapidly rose up against the city's levees, a series of walls designed to keep the area from flooding. Before Katrina made landfall, the levees broke. A wall of water rushed into the city, trapping thousands. What followed was one of the worst natural disasters in U.S. history. Storm surge was the main cause of death during Katrina. In fact, it can be the most dangerous part of any hurricane. It occurs when strong winds from an approaching hurricane push water into the shore. As the sea rises, a bulge of water sweeps over coastal areas, causing destruction along the way. These are the normal astronomical tides at Dauphin Island to the east of New Orleans. When you compare them to the water levels during Hurricane Katrina, you can see the dramatic rise. That's the storm surge. A storm surge can also be unpredictable. Rising sea levels caused by global warming increase the risk of storm surge, but there are many factors that can change its size and strength. For example, the largest one recorded before Katrina was about 22 feet during Hurricane Camille in 1969. But Camille was a Category 5 storm with 190-mile-per-hour winds. Katrina was only a Category 3 with 130-mile-per-hour winds, but it had a storm surge of about 28 feet. Katrina had lower winds than Camille, but it was twice as wide, which dramatically increased the storm surge.
Man, we got to warn. We got to tell as many people as we can to get out.
In 2005, Ivor Van Heerden was working at the Hurricane Center at LSU. He watched the storm approach, knowing the damage and death it could bring. Many didn't have the means to leave. Some didn't have a car, didn't have a place to go, or the money to pay for a hotel room in Baton Rouge or any place else away from Katrina's path. Others didn't really believe the warnings, didn't know the levees would fail. Van Heerden knew not everyone would leave, and when he got word the levees had failed, all he could do was sit by and watch.
You know people are going to die, and you feel helpless, like, I'm trying. sorry.
It's from our room. It's from our room.
It's devastating. I mean,
Oh gosh. Oh God.
passionless.
气候变迁是真的，遗憾的是，即使在卡翠娜风灾夺走1800多条人命的16年后，依然有人不相信。
过去我们以为森林野火会比较低的山林的地方，但是加州的野火改写了这个历史。这次的野火发生在 Lake Tahoe， 你去过吗？如果你去过那个如诗如画的地方，你看到以下的画面，你可能会哭。有些地区呢，它甚至海拔了8500尺。而在 Lake Tahoe 地方，人们怎么样想都不会想到这么美的地方会发生森林大火，有22000人紧急逃离。
4000名的消防队员穿梭在森林里，一分不清是白天还是晚上。橘灰色的薄雾笼罩四周，大半个月来，他们无时无刻不绷紧神经，因为火仍在蔓延。
We're not comfortable at all out here, and it's been like that for the last 2 weeks of this fire. It's shown itself to be very unpredictable and very aggressive as it's moving through this drought-stricken, heavy timber and a lot of vegetation. It's so dry and easily ignitable. So moving into tonight with the increased winds, the firefighters on the line tonight know they're in for quite a firefight, working to protect the structures and keeping this community intact and safe.
8月中旬，从加州首府沙加缅度以东的山区开始燃烧的卡尔多大火，越过了山脊，朝着加州和内华达州州界上的太浩湖盆地南端倾袭。
Now, what we've seen overnight is the fire move deeper into the basins, come down off Echo Summit. It is now established in Christmas Valley. That's all those hot spots you see there from satellite imagery. And I put the yellow arrow because this is roughly the way that the fire will move today. Now, there'll be twists and turns. There'll be things that are expected and things that are unexpected. But we know roughly where it's going, and that is why we have such concerns on a day like today. Now, the winds are calm at the moment, but they will be gusting 30 to 35 miles per hour at times in the basin, and that's going to be the reason why everybody's out.
南太浩湖镇与邻近几个村落，约有22000多的居民被要求撤离，成千上万的车辆堵在了高速公路上。
So we did get the evacuation warning last night, and then this morning as I was packing, neighbors were knocking on my door saying mandatory evacuation. Unfortunately, some were panicking. And now we're just waiting to all get out. It's kind of a mass exodus, kind of expected coming this late in the game. But what can you do?
太浩湖区是全年的度假胜地，夏季有岸边的水上活动，冬季有滑雪场，还可以随时到赌场试手气。但是现在几乎是人去楼空，只有落难的野生大棕熊趁着四下无人，跑到镇上的垃圾桶翻找食物。就怕度假村被毁，业者在情急之下想出了妙招，把造雪机拿来当作灭火器，对抗来势汹汹的野火。
It's like that all over town, though. It's like a ghost town, really.
Since the fire, I'm 80% down. So I don't cover my payroll, I don't cover my rent.
通常暑假的收入是用来支应接下来10月和11月的空窗期。显然7月以来，因为野火已陷入困境，加上弥漫的浓烟污染了度假区，观光客也不会上门，店家面临关闭的危机。卡尔多大火迄今已将超过77300公顷的干旱林地化为焦土。消防人员原本料想内华达山脉的花岗岩山脊能达到天然屏障的效用，谁知道在强风的助长下仍然失守，余烬飘过，消防人员仅控制了将近20%的火线。
Fuels are combusting very rapidly, and it's going to drive that what we call a convective column, a column of rising hot air up off of the fire, And if it actually gets deep enough, it's kind of counterintuitive, but it gets cold enough that it causes all the water in that plume to condense. And that's what we see as this cloud, this bright white cloud.
Yeah, that pyrocumulus, this is one of Neil's primary research areas. He says winds in this type of environment can create winds up to 10 times stronger than outside the fire.
So that means that the fire is accelerating that air that has to flow in to replace the air that's going up in the updraft and is drawing air in. And those inflows and those accelerations are ultimately what's driving the fire and kind of creating these crazy winds around the fire that firefighters often talk about.
应付顽强的迪克西和卡尔多，国民警卫队派出了数百名的士兵、飞行员和几架军用的飞机，加上加州1.5万名的消防人员。但这些资源无法与大火抗衡，失控的林火迫使森林服务局采取了不寻常的举动，宣布从8月31日起关闭18个国家公园，为期至少17天。
What we're experiencing is not normal. I hope it's not the new normal.
科学家指出，加州过去几年野火燃烧山林的高度，正是全球暖化的铁证。过去由于海拔高、气温低，生长的植被不易燃烧的高山，现在也有可能成为一片焦土。此外，救火队员也很难进入如此崇山峻岭与大火搏斗。加州有史以来第2大野火迪克西和卡尔多是唯2两次越过了内华达山脉的野火，而一波又一波的天灾浩劫考验着地球的承受度。正当威力强大的艾达飓风侵袭美国路易斯安那，另外一个飓风诺拉28日也狂扫墨西哥。尽管是1级飓风，诺拉的威力仍然相当惊人，尤其是500毫米的降雨总量，造成了威胁性命的暴洪和泥流。不少上传社群媒体的影片中可以看到，滚滚洪流淹没了城镇市集，桥梁被洪水冲垮，建筑物就像脆弱的饼干轰然垮塌，街道上到处都是残垣瓦砾。极端气候所带来的伤害，已是我们不得不面对的课题。然而，我们到底做到了多少？大约有200名来自环保组织反抗灭绝的示威群众，8月30号在伦敦塔桥举行了静坐抗议，要求政府和企业采取紧急行动，以遏制气候变化和阻止生物多样性的损失。由于封锁了道路，招致警察前来驱离，并且有11人被逮捕。
I'm here because I think our voices are heard louder when we come in a professional capacity, and I've got an opportunity to tell my story as a doctor and talk about what I see as a result of air pollution and make the link between burning fossil fuels and the harms of air pollution and the wider harms of global warming and climate breakdown that we're seeing. Then only then can that put pressure on the people with real power to make policy changes, because I think that's how things are going to change, not by people recycling differently or driving a little bit less.
各地时而激起的抗争，是人们对地球环境的担忧。天候所带来的灾难，不断地提醒着我们，尚未做好准备，已经赶不上极端变化的速度了。
在这一次艾达风暴里头，我们所看到对路易斯安那最严重的摧毁，还 还是电网？现在美国的 Washington Post 非常善尽媒体的角色，正在调查这件事情。而美国的众议院在这一次即将通过的1兆美元的基建法案里头，包括了电网，在9月27号的时刻将进行正式的表决。美国的电网的老旧，像路易斯安那这个地方是1950年代到1960年代所盖的，飓风考验了上次是防洪的措施，而这一次是电网。
Hurricane Ida leaves a trail of destruction.
The utilities rebuilt after Katrina did not hold. This massive transmission tower mangled, power lines falling into the Mississippi River. Ida damaging all 8 transmission lines that supply the New Orleans area with electricity.
We have 1 million people without electricity. All of Orleans, Jefferson Parish, St. Bernard, and Plaquemine. Imagine you are a patient who relies upon home oxygen, and you've got a generator, but you can't get gasoline for your generator because the gas station doesn't have electricity to pump the gas.
极端天气事件暴露美国电网脆弱又老旧，飓风艾达袭击路易斯安那和密西西比州，造成超过3000公里的输电线，200多个变电站故障，发电机需要的燃料也短缺，部分地区民众恐要过上数周没电用的生活。
In addition to flooding, the lack of electricity means lack of air conditioning on hot summer days, or carbon monoxide poisoning from generators that aren't used correctly. Also, the city's pumping stations rely on power. These are meant to control flooding, and right now they're forced to rely on a backup power system.
路易斯安那州2020年的发电来源70%是天然气，其余包括煤炭、核能、水力和太阳能等，但总和不足以符合全州需求。约1/5电力是经由跨州电网从他州供应。问题就在于，美国现在用的电网大多数是在60-70年前建造，当时预期使用50年，且是在没有频繁的极端天气事件影响下。
And the grids most Americans are on aren't just big, they're huge. The entire East Coast, from Canada to Florida, is on one grid, and the entire West Coast is connected in another. While most power tends to stay local, this grid allows electricity to flow over huge areas and between states. Like in New York City, power comes from energy plants in New York, but also from neighboring states and even Canada. This huge grid also means in emergencies, power can be directed where it's needed.
Our current grid is essentially a one-way, dumb system where electrons are simply moved from points of generation, whether it's a coal plant, hydro, nuclear, or solar, sent generally long distances across high voltage lines to nodes that are the interface between the inter and intrastate transmission system and then the distribution grid that steps down the voltage from the high voltage to the lower efficiency but easier to manage voltage that we send to our homes and businesses.
When you're sending a lot of power over just a few lines, that means that a tree falling on those power lines or a storm can easily knock out power to a lot of people.
而且大多数的电网设施都是建造在地面上，费用较低廉。输电线地下化1英里要花费约300万美元，高架电线1英里花费约80万美元，但更容易受天灾人祸波及，电力传输效率折损。美国电网设计的时代背景是在气候较稳定的年代，然而2000年以来，因天气相关问题造成的断电增加67%。相信大家对今年2月德州暴雪大断电还记忆犹新。
So most of Texas is on its own grid. It means they don't have to follow the same regulations as the rest of the country, like reliability and cost standards. But it also means when it lost power in the storm, it couldn't easily get electricity from other states. Its independence kept it in the dark. Being on its own, Texas has to make all their own power. They have a variety of sources. When the storm came, it affected everyone. Several coal plants stopped operating as coal piles froze. One of 4 Texan nuclear plants went offline. Some wind turbines stopped working in the freezing cold. Natural gas, which actually contains water vapor, froze in storage wells and pipelines. Every one of these systems failed, in part, And it had nothing to do with the type of energy and everything to do with these companies not being prepared for the cold.
电网同样需要跟上气候变迁的速度，强化更新以承受极端天气的冲击。电网系统强健与否攸关生命安全，但美国电网过时，大多数的电力公司和公家监管机构也没有适时因应气候变迁加剧的风险。
Clearly, you can run an energy system in cold temperatures. There are wind turbines operating in Antarctica and gas plants in Alaska and Alberta. So this is not a technology-specific issue. It was more a failure to anticipate that this is something that could even occur in Texas at this, length and severity, and to prepare for extreme cold temperatures.
New Orleans City Council, which has overseen energy for decades, has decided to outsource a lot of its oversight responsibilities. And what they've done is they actually spend the vast majority of their budget on hiring consultant companies to regulate Entergy's. People are going to start looking at these incidents in the past and examining whether this company, Entergy, failed to upgrade its system in preparation for an event like this, which many people, saw coming for many years.
One big issue is that a lot of utilities are effectively monopolies, and they're regulated by regulators that are trying to protect these old business models.
美国上回大规模投资在电力系统上是在2009年，当年生效的美国复苏与再投资法案中，拨款45亿美元更新电力系统，多数用来在全美各地安装智慧电表上，可提供顾客和电力公司详细能源使用数据，帮助顾客更有效率使用能源。电力公司可及时调整电力供需，但实际使用上却没有充分发挥效用。
About half the U.S. households have smart meters. Now, things like the data and analytics, very low level of usage. So the meter data gets captured, it's used for billing, it's used for customer service. In most utilities, it's not used for much more.
要跟上21世纪的环境变迁，美国理想电网是用干净能源发电，落实零碳排，搭配微电网系统，在主电网失灵时可救援供电，输电线更新成可大范围双向传送干净电力，并能防御骇客攻击，承受天灾袭击。参院8月通过的1兆美元基建法案就包含打造理想电网的预算，该法案还有待众院表决。
Most states already have net metering policies, allowing solar customers to sell energy back to the grid. Many believe that the next step is letting customers sell energy from their home battery systems or their EVs.
Your electric vehicle could be an asset for the grid. So when more power is needed, your vehicle will get a message, stop charging and start discharging, and give us some of that battery power because we need it right now.
理想的电网时代还路途遥远，当下调整个人用电习惯也有助维护老旧电网，在高峰期节电、低峰期用电。现代化生活已离不开电力，聪明用电才能避免断电之苦。
我们待会儿回到文茜的世界周报第2小时，为大家来看美国在阿富汗的最后撤军。